Welcome everyone. I'm Laurie Cooke, and I am here to have a wonderful dialogue with our incoming HBA CEO, Susan O'Connor.
Thank you, Laurie.
Oh, it's really exciting. I've had the opportunity to have some wonderful conversations with you, so we've got a really successful, seamless transition. And it's just been such an honor, and I wanted to welcome you to the HBA family.
Thank you so much, Laurie. It's such an honor to continue to lead the organization, advancing gender parity. And I'm grateful for all your support for a successful transition, a seamless transition. And so thank you so much.
Oh, it is my honor and pleasure to welcome you on. The organization made a great choice. Going to be in good hands. So one of the things we do at the HBA and in any wonderful association is you always start with the mission. So we've been for many years furthering the advancement and impact of women in the business of healthcare. So, there's a lot going on right now in the industry, lots of opportunities and as well as challenges. And one of the changes that I have seen is, the HBA has really focused on the woman, making sure we really are supporting her with advancing leadership skills, her acumen in business, etc. And we are seeing a shift now that we're making a lot more progress by focusing on the organization, right? Really hitting the systemic barriers that are preventing the woman that is leader ready to move at the same rate and pace as her male colleagues. So I'm wondering, what are the sorts of things you're seeing that are either big changes or could be opportunities for us?
Great. So I think when we talk about the impact that we want to have in healthcare and in improving health outcomes, what's key is that we really need to get more women in the boardroom as well as on the executive committees. But it doesn't start there. It needs to go through the pipeline and deep in within the organization. So I know one of the things that you and I are both passionate about is data and being able to look at gender parity at all levels of the organization and at all diversity candidates as well. So that to me is the most important thing. And if we think about the systemic issues potentially, obviously you can't pinpoint there's likely just one. And that's why I think the Gender Parity Collaborative is so important. It helps us look at data, and it helps us look at systems commonality and then uniqueness for each corporate partner. But I would submit that one of the areas where we get stuck is in the area of the VP and the SVP level. And that's why I brought up the pipeline piece of it. And so what systematic changes could be made or enablers can be made is to have a specific leadership program development for women with that purpose of gender parity at those grade levels. So it would be objective, it would be specific capabilities that are needed, thinking through the executive committee vision for what we have for those women.
Right.
There would be a thoughtful experiential leadership opportunity. An example of that could be someone who's a clinical development lead actually getting a P&L leadership experience. And that would be important. And then a third piece, which I found from my own personal journey, is sponsorship. And sponsorship we know is different than mentorships, but if one of these programs is designed thoughtfully and the relationships and the matching is created, the end result could potentially lead to that. And so those are some of the tenets that I see that can be helpful solutions to overcome those barriers or where women can get stuck. And that's why the Gender Parity Collaborative is so important, because together we can really help with resources. And that's, I think, HBA's role, to really be the continuity across that and to providing tools and know-how and be kind of tapping into the essence of all those corporate partners to come up with even a better solution than one would have on their own or we would have on our own. And that's kind of where the magic happens.
Totally agree. And one of the things we have seen in the Gender Parity Collaborative, and for those who are not familiar with that, it's a program the HBA has where companies come together to make sure that we're sharing what works and what maybe isn't the right thing to spend investment time and money on. And I think you're absolutely right. The senior VP role is a really challenging a sort of barrier within an organization. And we also worked at the earlier end where McKinsey identified this broken rung where more men were jumping ahead at that manager level. And we saw a huge change in that. And when you change that, you're going to change the talent pool from which you can then pull to director and to VP. So I think that new program at the VP level makes a lot of sense.
Can I build on that?
Sure,
That's okay.
go for it.
One of the things we also talk about is the importance of the multi-generational diversity. And that, I think, taps into that McKinsey insight that if we can start at that level as well, and then as those leaders advance, then we're kind of also fast forward solving because that's all they know.
That's very true. Very true, very true. So what do you think the opportunities right now are for us if we're really looking at it sounds like some new programs. One of the things that we also saw in the collaborative was that when you look at the data, and we were seeing some really great advancements with some of our companies in the collaborative actually achieving gender parity, at least at some of the levels, is it wasn't for all women. So, I think there is an issue for us to make sure we're not just looking at data at the highest level and digging in. So do you see any opportunities on that front for the HBA in terms of that racial, ethnic disparity that is obviously present in our industry?
Well, when I think about it, it ties back to what is the impact that we're trying to create. And if we're talking about improving healthcare and we're talking about improving healthcare outcomes, we can't do it if our membership community and our corporate partners, et cetera, doesn't match society. So we really need to have, and that's where I think some of the employee resource groups can be very powerful and our ability to do that. So that would, if we focus on the end goal and what we're trying to do and use the metrics and be more thoughtful with the systemic approaches, then I think we can really have the diverse workforce that we aspire to, as you said, at multiple levels of the organization.
And having that kind of diverse workforce is going to make our companies more profitable and make them more impactful, which is what we all want to impact healthcare. One of the things that I think we all agree on is organizations need the best leaders that they can get. So how can they really get the best talent, and what is the best talent? And I have started to see, and I think the pandemic impacted this shift from the idolized, this is what a leader looks like, to understanding that a leader can have a whole range of skills and leadership acumen in the toolkit, and it doesn't have to be a very gender specific. So men have these kind of traits and women have these kind of traits. I mean, just look at how empathy during the pandemic went from this more undervalued female skill to like the top skill that any leader can have. So when you think about leadership skills, what comes to the top of your list?
Just to comment on the empathy topic, I think there's an aha to the world, to your point, around the importance of empathy. But I think we've always known in healthcare, women have always brought that empathetic style. And I think that has been one of the differentiators that has enabled us to be successful and to actually achieve better than expected outcomes, because we have that connectivity with people. And when that's in the culture, I think it leads to better results. So just to reinforce that one, I think, is being one that it was recognizing, I believe it was always there within our HBA community. But the three that I would highlight, just thinking about the time that we're in now, and I believe that women are even more positioned to lead and to lead for success. But the first one I think is candor. The second one I think is adaptability. And the third one is an ability to manage through this virtual hybrid, whatever we want to call it, workforce. So the first one around candor, what's been clear is that people need to be reassured that everything's going to be okay. There's a lot of uncertainty, there's a lot of unknowns, there's a lot of ambiguity, and the clarity that can be provided in terms of direction and purpose and meaning, I think, is something that's really important in a way that's not just candor, but it's honest and it's transparent and it's authentic. And what that enables people to do is to be grounded and to feel at ease, and to also have the clarity around what areas to focus on. So I think, and also there to be feedback around what's working and what people need more of. So I think candid communication is the first one. The second one around adaptability, I think the key capabilities of a leader, and I think women are also, well positioned to do this, is to, despite the ambiguity and the uncertainty about how the marketplace is evolving, we know that there's been so much change and some really good accessors, right, in healthcare that have happened over the last 18 months. But it's the ability to be decisive in the midst of that unknown or ambiguity, but also to have the openness as new data or as things evolve to actually go back and adjust those initial early decisions that were made. And the third one around managing the hybrid workplace, I think as a leader, it's really our responsibility to be able to know what people need and to be able to, in the short term, really provide the resources and tools so that they can reintegrate. I mean, I think there's degrees of companies that have already reintegrated, but there's still some to come.
That's right.
There also is that as we do become whatever versions of in-person, if it's 3 days a week or if it's different ways of coming together for purposeful, thoughtful events, we need to really be convening and knowing that we want to collaborate, and that's the reason why we're coming together, and there's other work that can be more suited for people to do at home. And that's where I think there's that candor comes in terms of what does the leaders need to accomplish, and then what does everybody need from their own work style to drive their effectiveness, and the leader needs to provide the resources for that.
Agreed. One of the things that I do think we are seeing when you start to get into the topic of mentoring, and I'm connecting it to the candor you mentioned, is that sometimes men are not as open with the mentoring feedback to a female employee, whether they think we're too sensitive to receive that feedback, or we as women maybe too sensitive. So I encourage women and I encourage men to make sure that you are getting really candid feedback, because that's how you develop, right, as an individual. So I know the HBA has a great mentoring program.
Definitely.
Just absolutely superb. So would love to know, who mentors you? Who do you look to for mentoring?
Oh, that's a great question. Thank you for that. So I have a multifactorial approach to it, honestly. And I think that even like mentorship, people think, oh, was it 6 months? Is it a year? What's the nature of the engagement? I look at it differently. I think everybody's a mentor. And I think there's a 360 degrees, really degrees to that. So, but for me, I would kind of define it personally into like 3 different areas. One is to build on the allies, whole concept. I tend to reach out to my male counterparts that are more at a kind of an EVP level, just in terms of their mindset. I think kind of really helps me grow in my thinking. And so some of the things that I reach out to them for are, I would probably say 2 things. One is I love complexity. Everybody will learn that about me over time. And I love to solve problems as well. And so one of the things with that, especially going back to that ambiguity, is you don't always have all the data, right. Things are evolving. So you look at scenarios. And that's where I've been able to kind of tee up to some mentors to say, how might you help me think this through? Or what are your thoughts? And it always brings me to a better outcome than I may have had before. So that's definitely one. The other is the areas of negotiation that have always led to better outcomes. And I think this is where we have the permission as women to assert our voice and to make the ask, and we're all growing in that area, and so they've been always able to help me in that area, and it's always led to unprecedented better than I would have done on my own. So that's sort of the first bucket. The other one in the female mentorship camp are really kind of looking at people that can help me be my full potential. So they know the business context, and they help me really see in myself what I can really own and to leverage to lead to a certain outcome. And it's always led me to, again, a better outcome than I would have had on my own. And the third area, maybe you think this is a soft area, but I mean, looking at best practices and looking at role models and looking at case studies, but that's also something that it's an indirect mentorship. You never meet the person, you know, and I know a lot of people love podcasts. That's another, you know, great way. But I mean, I'll just kind of come back to a recent influencer for me is the Prime Minister of New Zealand. I know New Zealand is closest to your heart, but Jacinda's done an incredible job. She's been International Women's Day, so many other forums, been as acknowledged for the great work that she did navigating through COVID. I think that's a great example where she had the candor, she had the confidence to say, here's the 4 things that we're going to do, even though she knew she wouldn't be popular, but it was clear. And look at the impact that she had. So that's where I think about male mentorship, female mentorship, and indirect kind of like self-study.
Yeah. Back to data.
Exactly.
So I have had the absolute pleasure of working with you for the past couple of weeks and getting to know you. And I know everyone's going to want to get to know you. So why did you choose HBA? What was it about HBA that attracted you?
So why HBA is that gender parity is near and dear to my heart. I mean, you know, the nonprofit work I did with the UN Women and some other board organizations that I've worked with earlier in my career. And so I do believe like gender parity for all women around the world is something that can change the world. So it's mission driven, it's purpose driven, and the opportunity to really lead at that level just has a new significance and meaning for me. And the fact that we have the united force for change. I mean, you started the movement, and now I think we have endless possibilities. And so that to me is just something that's inspiring, because I do think that there's so much that we can do, and there's this huge potential for us as well.
Fabulous. We're glad to have you. And you have such a great history and expertise in both healthcare and wellness. So interested to hear how you're thinking about bringing those 2 really important things together and how that will advance gender equity and parity.
Thank you. So at the intersection of healthcare and wellness, I would say is kind of my sweet spot. And when we think about that, I mean, there's data, there's been research that when patients are more actively involved in their health, it's not just about being on therapy, but if they're monitoring and doing more holistic wellness practices, they tend to even have a better outcome. So that's sort of an interesting area, and I think there's some systems insights that we could kind of get from that. So what that informs me in terms of our growth opportunities for HBA is to really diversify our corporate partnerships, to be able to include some healthcare systems, some providers, and even some health tech companies in order for us to kind of complement our ecosystem and complement our membership base to, again, kind of have that impact. So that would be what I would think about from, quote, a business standpoint. The second one I think is a little bit more personal for me, and it kind of ties back to that mentorship that I was talking about in terms of us leading as our best self. But I mean, I love so many of the programs that we have, the Fit to Lead and all those other programs, because when we can really be grounded, yet be expansive in what our possibility is, and be able to manage our own interpersonal boundaries to actually lead to our effectiveness, is something that I believe is kind of the whole component of wellness and how we can be better leaders. It's not about doing, you know, being 24/7 and doing so many things. It's about doing what we need to do in a meaningful way because we're bringing our best self to work. And then that leads to endless possibilities.
Endless possibilities and limitless and infinite hope.
Right, definitely.
Infinite hope. Well, one of the things I think is important to have exchange of ideas, especially from executive leaders, and I think there's an exchange of an HBA bling pin that I will hand over to you, hand over the reins of leadership to you, and I would love if you could close us out.
Laurie, you've touched so many lives in so many ways. hearing everyone's stories about how you impacted them, not only personally, but on their career journeys. And you've created such a legacy, not only from an individual level, but also in the ripple effect you had with corporations and the huge foundation that you've created, and even the multi-generational aspect of what we talked about earlier. So we will continue the amazing work that you've done, and the United Force for Change has so much momentum. And so it's an honor to continue your great work, and you have our commitment that we'll continue to do that in your honor and in your grace.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.